We're moving forward as a program without him. I said it to the guys today. There's no one that's bigger than the Power T.
And just like that, the Vols' 5-star and $8 million quarterback is no longer a member of the team. Josh Heupel moving on from Nico Iamaleava after a dramatic couple of days on Rocky Top. Nico's off to the portal, and Tennessee is not far behind as they are now looking for a signal caller. Welcome into the Ultimate College Football Show. He is Smoke Dixon. He is Cooper Petagna. I am Emily Proud, and boy, it has been a crazy couple of days for the Tennessee football program. We're going to get their thoughts in just a little bit, but for you first, let's go ahead and lay out the timeline of events. Just how did we get here? Well, on Thursday, we got conflicting reports of ongoing contract negotiations between Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava, and in the midst of all the chaos, though, Nico still attended a team dinner later that night. Then on Friday, he no-showed to practice, and no one on staff could reach him throughout the day, and that was apparently the final straw for Josh Heupel. So on Saturday morning, Heupel informed the team that they are moving on from Nico, and his locker was already emptied. All of this before the Vols spring game, Saturday afternoon. So looking at all of this, this is what we would call unprecedented for college football, right? We've seen holdouts in bowl games and stuff, but a spring holdout of a player of this magnitude, we have not seen it before. So just first off, what were you thinking as you watched all of this unfold over the weekend?
How did we get here from this five-star talent that was ascending in the right direction to the point now of being removed from the spring game? And again, we're talking about practice. So how do we go from him being our main guy, from missing out one day in a dinner, to being removed from his team in 24 hours?
Really sad, really unfortunate. I think you and I were talking before this, and no winners in this, no winners for Tennessee, no winners for Nico Iamaleava and his camp. And, what's unfortunate, you look at it from an objective evaluator's lens. You look at it, and Nico, a very talented, physically gifted quarterback, the number 2 player in the country behind Arch Manning in 2023. He's ranked the number 1 player in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal as well. And a lot of people will look at last season where he was 10-2 as a starter, lost the playoff game against Ohio State. He's only started 14 games, and it was a guy that didn't play a lot of football in high school as well. He needs continuity. He needs structure for him to be able to continue to develop and ascend into that ceiling we continue to talk about. You look at last year, lower 60% completion rate, a guy that only had 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. We've seen the height of this offense in Tennessee under a guy like Hendon Hooker at the quarterback position. Tennessee didn't do a lot in the transfer portal. A lot of what was to be expected was going to be on the shoulders of Nico Iamaleava taking the next step. Now, for a young quarterback entering his sophomore season, he's going to have to go learn a new system, learn a new structure, learn a new environment. So for you to compromise on the long-term stability and upside of a young prospect like this, it's a really tough situation, and it's going to hurt him in the long term as he tries to seek more short-term, which I would guess, financial gain.
We'll talk about what's next for him in the short term in terms of his transfer portal market, also what's next for Tennessee in terms of their transfer portal market as well. But I want to get your thoughts real quick, Smoke, on what Coop had to say just about how Tennessee and Nico in general, this is not good for his long-term development. What were your thoughts as far as how this affects Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback, in the short term?
Well, short term, he needs development. And like Cooper just said, he needs to throw the ball and understand concept and just be in a building where he's allowed to be that way and not look at everything outside of football. Yeah. Because right now, this does not look like it's a football decision. It's a financial decision that the player should not ever have to worry about. So really, you need to look at your representation and say, are you guys doing the best thing for Nico, or is everybody else doing for the betterment of themselves?
Yes, and apparently this dates back all the way to December. If it seems like it happened so quickly, there were apparently some rumblings, according to our own Josh Pate, that he could have potentially held out of the Vols postseason game. Let's take a listen what Pate had to say.
And it's been happening behind the scenes. This is not even, guys, I cannot stress this enough, this is not even remotely close to the only instance. There are far more screwed up instances than this happening right now probably with your own collective or your own general manager and your own program. You just don't know about it. This stuff was happening last December during the playoffs, with this kid included, but not just this kid. They were trying to get more money out of Tennessee, and other players on playoff teams were trying to get more money out of playoff teams before the playoff games. They were trying to leverage playoff participation. Because do you know why? You want to know what the explainer was? The explainer was, well, our client, half these folks don't know the I comes before the E in the word, but hey, our client is being paid X amount of money to participate in 12 games, maybe a 13th if you make the conference championship game. But you guys made the playoff. He should make more money. This is the kind of BS that's happening behind the scenes right now. There is no structure.
That seems to be the common sentiment among the college football public right now, is that there's no structure, and because of what's happened with the NCAA and everything in the sport, that it allowed something like this to happen. But ultimately, Josh Heupel had to be the one to step in and say, I'm shutting this down. What effect does his move and kind of this maybe jut off from what we've seen from player empowerment, what effect does that have on the sport as a whole?
I think there are a lot of players maybe of Nico Iamaleava's stature looking at how this plays out over the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, and sees, okay, where does Nico ultimately end up? Because that's going to tell the story of the result of this whole fiasco of what we've seen over the last couple of days. And you look at Nico and you look at his situation, and a lot's been made about what he had coming back, right? Some of the conversation has been, well, this really wasn't a financial decision. They weren't happy with what Tennessee was bringing back. And you think about Tennessee, Lance Hurd, a former five-star at the left tackle spot. They bring in David Sanders, potentially battling it out for the right tackle spot. They brought in some guys, Sam Pendleton from Notre Dame, Wendell Moe from Arizona. So they tried to reinforce the trenches. But ultimately, at the end of the day, how we started the show with Josh Heupel saying nobody's bigger than the team, that was him planting the flag and saying, okay, at some point, we've had enough. And even though this might set us back in the short term, this is in the best long-term interest of the program. And I said it today on X that, Josh Heupel is probably getting a lot of thank you cards from a lot of coaches around the country right now, because I think a lot of coaches feel this internally, but they don't know where ultimately, like, hey, at what point do you have to, pucker up and kiss that baby goodbye? Yeah. You just got to let them go for the betterment of the team. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And certainly, like I said earlier, there's no winners out of this. And I don't think Nico, and we're going to talk about potential fits a little bit later, Nico needs continuity. He needs structure. He needs to be able to continue to develop in the same system that he's been in over the last 2 years. There is no better place for him that he's going to find outside of Tennessee. There's nowhere. It doesn't matter where he ends up. He needs that continuity, the same language, force multiplier. He doesn't get that now. So it's an unfortunate situation. But to get back to the main question, how does it impact teams going forward? I think teams now have a little bit of leverage because there is an example there to say, hey, listen, the grass isn't always greener. Your hand can get stuck in the cookie jar, and then all of a sudden this can be a situation that doesn't work out to your advantage.
Cool. Back in December, I just had the opportunity to sit in the coach's office that was in the playoffs. And talking to Coach, I was like, Coach, you ready for this? And I was hyped up. Coach, he was beaten down. For the fact that he was like, Smoke, you don't understand that I just had my entire backup defensive line walk into my office, my backup corner walk into my office and tell me they're not going to play or else. So I went back and just thought about it and was like, well, I get it. And two things can be true. We all signed up to play football, but now financially everyone's benefiting from this except the players. Like, coaches are getting playoff bonuses. Everybody's getting a bonus except the players. So why isn't it fair at some point for us to look in and adjust how we're thinking about college football to help mend this? Because right now we're saying the system's broken, but it's only broken because the adults are the only ones that's winning in this situation. The players are sitting back, and yes, they do have power, because as much as you can remove that player from your locker room and think that you're doing well, if the player affects winning, the bottom line that we're all talking about, yeah, your job is truly going to be affected as well too. Because if you lose, you're going to get fired. The player is still going to have another opportunity to go somewhere else and get paid, and that's what we have to look out on this side. It's not just a one-sided thing. Two things can be true. The players have to abide by what they signed, but the coaches also need to realize that at some point they need to look in and say, from the other lens, and say, well, if I was a player, would I not want to get compensated properly for making a 16-game run instead of 13? 3 that I'm not getting paid for, that you might win a national championship?
So who's to blame for this then?
I don't think there's anyone for the blame. I think the system is just broken. And until we get structure around how we can navigate around the system, I think we're all flying by the pants.
But in the meantime, we can draw this back to some conversations that we've had big picture-wise over the last couple of weeks about GMs and their job.
Right.
They have to be the ones that have to take the proactive step to say, all right, we've seen this play out on behalf of Tennessee, and this is a nightmare situation, and this is something that we can all learn from. We talked about the hire that Florida made at general manager with Nick Polk, bringing him over from the Atlanta Falcons. He worked with athletes first. His forte really being on the salary cap negotiation side. That's important, and I think all teams can learn from that and say, hey, do we have the infrastructure in place to make sure that our deals that we negotiate, that we get to an SEC championship or we get to a conference championship or we get to a playoff game, we're not going to be in a situation where then we're held hostage by the player, where we have to go back, renegotiate up against the clock to make sure we can even field the team for one of the most important games on the schedule.
Coop, Doug Whaley, general manager of the Buffalo Bills, taught me this valuable lesson. Don't ever get to the finish line with the player that you have to re-up. Get to him before he gets there, because the second that he gets there, somebody else has his ear, and you've lost out.
It's hard to tell when a player's going to get there, though, when there's no contracts. The contract is supposed to be for both sides in this instance.
And I can easily tell you when they're getting there, when they affect the bottom line of winning.
Yeah.
And you know that they're your starter, and you're looking at your roster and you don't have anyone else to compete with them, get to them. Because if you lose them, you're losing the locker room and your team.
Because now Tennessee has 2 scholarship quarterbacks. They expect to be in the market for another one. For that, we're going to bring in our friend Chris Hummer, national college football writer, who's here. Chris, you you were part of this whole breaking news process. You were providing us with lots of updates, both on 247sports.com and cbssports.com, talking to sources around all of this. Just what was this like unfolding from your vantage point?
It was interesting. It really did go from 0 to 100 really quickly. And I don't say that like this wasn't bubbling behind the scenes. Like Nico and his camp had been asking for things from Tennessee since December, essentially. But this is a situation everybody on both sides expected to be resolved. Even going into, I think it was Friday morning, like both sides expected this to be resolved. It didn't really hit a breaking point until Nico didn't show up to practice. And that kind of broke the camel's back, if you will, in terms of Tennessee's willingness to move forward. And it just shows you how things can change in a really short amount of time. And I think Tennessee called Nico's camp's bluff a little bit, and it really devolved into one of the crazier stories we've seen in this era. But the reality is, like, everybody expected this to be resolved. This was like floating behind the scenes for a couple weeks before transfer rumors had come out. Like, people around that program dismissed them, people in his camp dismissed them. Like, ultimately it would get worked out, and then it didn't. And that's just kind of what happens in life sometimes, and in college football, especially with as much money as out there. And covering it's always interesting because these things can change very quickly.
I'm sure it was an interesting weekend for you, and now we have to look ahead because the spring transfer portal window opens up on Wednesday, and we were all kind of waiting for when would that domino fall, right? When would we have some of that action? Well, we've got it. A brand new number 1 player in the transfer portal will be Nico Iamaleava. So what sort of effect does him now entering the portal have on the quarterback market as a whole?
Well, we had the stillest pond possible, right? Like, just like no wind, not moving at all. And then somebody dropped a boulder in the middle of it. And that's the kind of effect you have with somebody of that caliber going into the portal. But it remains to be seen, like, frankly, what his market is going to look like. He can't officially enter till Wednesday. But I think it's been a little more tepid behind the scenes than most people would realize. There have been a lot of teams floated out there, many of whom will not pursue Nico. Just because of either the reputation or the price tag that kind of comes with the situation. And he is somebody that, like, with the market, eventually there are going to be ripples. Tennessee is going to have to go get a quarterback, as y'all were talking about. Nico's going to have to find a home, and somebody's going to be upset that their team went out and added a starting quarterback. So you're going to see dominoes fall. But in terms of like Nico himself, like I really do wonder how the market's going to play out, because I think based on early returns, like things could change. Like I think they might have overplayed their hand a little bit.
Are there any early contenders with schools? If so, who are some potential names that we should keep an eye on? You mentioned some that have been named, but you don't think are actual possibilities.
The only school I would really like highlight as a real possibility at the moment is UCLA. The Bruins make a lot of sense, close to home for him. They have been in the starting quarterback market this offseason. They added Joey Aguilar from, I believe, Appalachian State earlier this offseason, but not the needle mover that I think many UCLA fans would have liked at that position. Nico Iamaleava would really fill that hole for them. But there's a question of price point. Like, I don't think Nico's making around 2.5 at Tennessee. I don't think UCLA is going to get there, or at least based on historic spending for UCLA wouldn't get there. And that's what kind of sources around the country say too. So they'd have to figure that out. North Carolina has been bandied about as a possibility. I'm not totally eliminating them as a possibility quite yet. I think they're doing their due diligence in that way, but I don't consider that likely, at least at the moment. Some other teams that have been thrown out there, like Texas Tech, Notre Dame, like I would be shocked if either one of them went that direction. USC as well. I've been told that is a no. So unless we have a surprise contender come around, which is possible, like UCLA is the school I'm looking at right now. It's just not going into this cycle, there were not a lot of teams looking for a quarterback, and I don't think that changes when Nico hits the market. Like, he is a very good quarterback. I don't know if he's somebody, given everything that's occurred, that everybody's going to push out their guy to go after.
There's also a past relationship with the Iamaleava family with UCLA that could potentially affect these things. But yeah, you mentioned that the Bruins might not get to that $2.5 million range. That wasn't enough for him at Tennessee, and so reportedly looking for $4 million. So it is interesting to see how that plays out. But there is also the situation happening at Tennessee, which is that they have two quarterbacks on scholarship right now, and our Patrick Brown from GoVols 24/7 has more on what they could potentially be exploring.
What now for Tennessee after its messy public split with starting quarterback Nico Iamaleava? On a human level, the abrupt end things had to be tough on many in the program. I think of head coach Josh Heupel and offensive coordinator Joey Halzle in particular, given the relationship that they had with Iamaleava. But Heupel and team leaders who talked after Saturday's orange and white game were almost defiant in their tone, discussing where the Vols will go from here. Heupel said Tennessee is built to win in 2025, and he's right. The Vols have won 30 games over the past 3 seasons and are coming off a college football playoff appearance last season. Tight end Miles Kitselman said the team leaders were in unison about how they felt about everything, and he expects the turmoil to bring the team closer together. And linebacker Arion Carter added that Tennessee will lean on its strong culture to avoid further fractures in the locker room. Now, I expect Tennessee to be looking for an experienced, proven starter in the portal, and the Vols should be appealing to any transfer quarterback. There's talent in the program, Heupel's track record of success with the position, and plenty of NIL resources readily available with Iamaleava coming off the books. So, if the Vols get the right guy, they should remain a contender in the SEC and for the CFB this fall.
Thank you to Patrick for that. You can check out more of his work at GoVols247.com. The whole crew has you covered there on all the chaos that's happened at Tennessee over the weekend. I want to throw it back to you, though, Chris, because he talked about what Tennessee could be looking for, which is an experienced starter. When I look at 247sports.com and who is available in the portal right now, I don't see a whole lot of that. So who are some potential names that Tennessee could pursue when the portal window opens on Wednesday?
Oh, I don't know about particular names, but
what kind
maybe
of
archetypes. I think Tennessee really could go 2 directions with this job, to be frank. And I think something to remember for Tennessee fans is Faison Brandon's the #1 player in the country in the 2026 class, and he's going to be on campus next year. And Tennessee has a lot of money invested in him, and Tennessee also has a lot of holes. So Tennessee could go out and spend $2.5 or $4 million if they wanted to, if they really wanted to stick it to Nico Iamaleava's camp. But there's also a possibility they go and get a slightly cheaper option, maybe a veteran quarterback with a lot of experience who is likely to start when you put him in the room, but not necessarily a guarantee. Somebody can come in and compete. Or they can go the other direction and just go all in for a year and go poach an experienced starter. I don't know if they've made that decision quite yet. I know there are definitely quarterbacks calling Tennessee at the moment and trying to gauge interest, and I know a lot of agents are doing the same. It's obviously a very attractive starting job, and it'll be very interesting what they do, because that's really the domino that can tip. It's not what Nico does necessarily. I think it's what Tennessee does that could really set the dominoes falling this cycle.
Yeah, Nico is the boulder in the nice calm waters that we had before. Feeling there'll be a few more rocks thrown in there too, as far as what Tennessee plans to do at the quarterback position. Josh Heupel did say after the spring game that, yeah, we only have 2 scholarship quarterbacks, so we need another one, dependent on whether or not that will be a starter. We'll see, but we're sure you're going to be all over it. Chris Hummer, thank you so much. You can check out more of his work at 247sports.com and cbssports.com. He has had us covered all weekend long with the timeline of events, how everything is shaking out, and with the portal opening on Wednesday, he is our portal guy, so he'll be all over everything happening there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how this will affect Tennessee, and you heard maybe what type of quarterback that they're going to go after, but let's go back to what he said about Nico, because you briefly mentioned what his market could potentially look like. There's a lot of things that you have to consider the talent that we know he's got, that you saw back in high school, versus what we've seen production-wise, which maybe hasn't lived up to that talent yet. So when you look at all of the things that come with him, including the baggage and how this all ended, where would you put his market?
Well, I think his market has caved substantially. And, what Chris said, there were rumors about this, that Nico was being shopped. And, there were substantial rumors out there that Nico was going to end up at USC. And then I think everything that happened and played out in public, you have to kind of look at that and say, all right, well, now that's a wash. Because you look at USC, Lincoln Riley, they have more momentum than they've ever had under his guidance in the last 3 years, bringing in Chad Bowden, the number 1 recruiting class in 2026. They have Jaden Maeva. We've talked about Nico, the prospect right now. Is he that much of an upgrade at $4 million over a Jaden Maeva or a Hassan Longstreet? Probably not. Notre Dame was rumored to be in there. And then you look at other schools like UCLA and Texas Tech. I think UCLA makes a lot of sense. Madden, his younger brother, Nico's younger brother, was committed there, flipped to Arkansas. So you wonder, all right, how much does that kind of really kind of soil it for a guy like Deshaun Foster? I think they could use each other. I think it would be a nice fit, low pressure expectations. I think North Carolina is a team to look out for just from looking at this on paper. The reason that I say that is you have a Bill Belichick in his 70s. This team was attached to Quinn Ewers. They were attached to John Mateer. Obviously, financially, they were ready to go make a push all in on one of these quarterbacks. The biggest difference is Quinn Ewers had been to a playoff, and John Mateer is one of the most established quarterbacks in all the country. Nico Iamaleava, we're still waiting on. So the other thing is that Nico's camp, really his father right now, and his agent are wearing a big egg on their face. Chris talked about the fact that, okay, Tennessee called their bluff. Now they're out there and they're open and they're seeing their options dry up very, very quickly. Perceptionally, if you were to say, all right, what's the best case scenario that we get out of this situation? Well, we go play for a coach that's won 6 Super Bowls and used to coach Tom Brady. At least that is a little bit more digestible to everybody out there, the consumer, where you can kind of sell that a little bit more. UCLA is not a better situation than Tennessee. North Carolina is not a better situation than Tennessee, especially in year 1 of a rebuild. So that being said, I think right now, once again, Nico's in a situation where he's not going to get the $4 million number. I know you and I are split on that. I think he'll probably end up closer to 2.5. Right. And he's going to have to look at it and say, all right, how do I balance my reputation versus what is the best on-field fit for me, which is going to make this thing really interesting. The last thing I'll say, it's early. I think the best thing him and his camp can do is regroup. 1, get some new representation, bring them in, get some fresh ideas. Let the market cool and let your reputation cool from this thing over the next couple weeks, and then see which teams look at their quarterback room and say, you know what, it's not good enough. Maybe we can come to an agreement where we can meet you in the middle financially, but the way that you played this with Tennessee is going to cost yourself probably $1 million, probably $1.5 million, and we're going to get you on a good deal that we like, and it's going to be an advantageous situation for us.
Quick. Cool.
That's the way that I would handle it.
You and I need to have a good conversation because I totally see it in another direction. I don't believe that he's ruined himself in terms of the eyes of college evaluators and coaches. We can go all the way back. Have we ever heard anything negative about Nico?
I'm not saying
No, we're just talking.
no.
No,
The
okay.
individual, no.
The individual, no. So most of it we've heard, or speculation is of his camp. So we think. We all know that every coach thinks that they can develop and get more out of a prospect than any other coach that coached that player, because it's ego, and you have to have that utmost belief in yourself with a talent such as that. So if I have a talent that's untapped, I believe if I get him into my quarterback room and around the guys that I feel like can get him to that next level, I'm going to do that. And the cost of winning is untapped. You and I both understand that. And to say someone's bottomed out with $2.5, $3 million, once you start talking about M's is M's. So 2 to 4, he's going to get whatever he wants. The phone has not stopped ringing for that young man. You and I both know that. College football is hungry for talented quarterbacks, irregardless of what baggage that we believe that he's bringing. But we've never heard of any of the baggage unless it was the day before the spring game, which we heard of in December, but that should have gotten handled. I do believe North Carolina might be a good setup for him because he can go to Operation Rehab. Just like every one of the coaches used to go to Nick Saban, Belichick can be the guy that washes you over, gets you to the next level that you need to get your camp calmed down, not allow them to come into your building and run your operation. Because all we've seen is the camp go into Tennessee, tell them what to do, negotiate on their behalf, in the window, outside of the window, and do whatever they want. You and I both know Lombardi and Belichick not allowing that to happen in their locker room.
Obviously, everything that went down with the negotiations and behind the scenes and how it ultimately, the breakup happened is going to be a massive part of this. It's not going to shock either of you to know that I love a good pros and cons list. And that's definitely going to be on a con for the teams that are thinking about whether or not they want to bring him in. But from a strictly football standpoint, where do you see the interest level in Nico based on, again, what you evaluated out of high school, which wasn't a lot on tape in terms of who he was as a quarterback. He didn't play a lot of high school football, versus what we've actually seen from him in college. How does that affect all of this?
Well, the player, to Smoke's point, I mean, he's the number one player in the transfer portal for good reason. Yeah. And I've never assigned any player number one ranking and not felt
you made that decision fairly quickly.
I did.
Right?
Well, yeah. the talent is rare. It's like rare earth minerals. It is really hard to come by. It's hard to find guys with his size that move the way that he does, that have the arm talent that he has. The biggest thing with him, and this is a really, really big thing, we keep gravitating back to the word potential. Does it all come together? We have seen flashes of that. And if you were to ask Tennessee fans, can you win a playoff game with him? The answer right now would be no. He is window dressing to a team that was top 10 in rushing, a team that was top 10 in defense, that was 77th in passing offense. Okay, so he was not the main thing driving Tennessee's success. I think that's where a lot of people have issue. Back to Smoke's point, a Lincoln Riley or a Mike Denbrock, a guy that's coached Jaden Daniels, a guy that's coached Caleb Williams and Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, they might say, okay, give me that guy. I can put that guy in my scheme and I can make things a little bit easier for him. It's, does he reach the potential of what he can be? That's really the question. The other thing that I want to address is the counterpoint that you brought up. North Carolina's point, when I'm saying what the $4 million point is, North Carolina, to me, has leverage because I don't think Nico Iamaleava wants to play his football at UCLA. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be another contender out there right now, but the contenders that we have heard, at least right now on paper, is UNC and UCLA. And I don't think Nico is going to leave a playoff team to go play for a team in the Big Ten that's going to struggle to win 6 or 7 games. And then
or
I think
does UCLA feel comfortable enough to negotiate with this family again and get screwed?
Well, that's my point. So if I'm Bill Belichick and Michael Lombardi, I'm saying, listen, we're not going to pay you 4.
Right.
We'll pay you something close to 3. And if you don't like it,
we're your best option. Yeah.
Go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's kind of my point on that. And I think the other part of this is, I know I keep going back on questions, but there was legit interest from legit college football playoff contenders until this whole thing went up in smoke on social media. All he had to do is really just handle it the right way. This is a PR crisis more than anything. So they handled it the wrong way, and unfortunately, Nico's going to be handicapped with his options because of how they played it.
Coop, I keep hearing he.
He represents his representation. We can continue to say that he is a kid, but when you make $2 million, you are accountable for the people that you surround yourself with. That is a reality. So whether it's his dad or an agent or somebody else, those are the people representing Nico Iamaleava. He has to be an adult in the situation and says, guys, I don't like the way that this is playing out, and you are impacting my short-term and my long-term future here. So those people actively right now, whether it's fair to Nico or not, represent Nico Iamaleava's best interest. That is the reality of the situation.
But we're hearing he, meaning that he's the only one involved. There was also a school that was involved that did this as well, too.
That did what?
Bad representation of the player. How the player looked to perception to the audience. That they couldn't get a deal done, and he got removed from the last practice of the spring game. So it looks bad on everybody. It's just not this one kid. The head coach for Tennessee played his part in it. The adults played his part in it as well, too. So it's not just a kid going saying, I want more money, I want more money, I want more money. A lot of this was handled wrong from the Tennessee point of view, from the kid's point of view.
I agree with that.
How much accountability should Nico take in this, I think, is what Cooper's arguing.
I think everybody in this should take an accountability. Should take some part of saying we were wrong by not handling it the proper way. Because if we did, you and I both agreed, this is the best situation for him. I'm pretty sure Hyper would say this is a great situation because now I have to go out and search for a quarterback that we don't know where he's at.
I'm not arguing that.
So why wouldn't I want a quarterback that helped? And he wasn't a major part of them winning. And I agree with you. Run game and defense was a major part. But this is an untapped talent that we all believe, including you and myself, that could get Tennessee to the next level.
Correct. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying that Tennessee is not accountable in this situation. What I'm saying is Tennessee's got to do what's best for them now. Nico's got to do what's best for him now. The representation here is involved, and they do represent Nico in this situation. It's unfortunate for both sides. I agree with that. And then if they could have it back, if they could go back a week ago, I think both of them would like to come back to the table and probably figure this thing out.
Agreed.
Yeah, and something that you and I discussed off air too is the personal element in this as well. With Josh Heupel being a former quarterback himself, knowing just how important it is to control that locker room and to have that say over I'm the leader, I'm the one in charge, I'm making the best judgment call. And so as soon as he didn't show up for practice and nobody could reach him, I think as a former quarterback, Josh Heupel was like, that's it, I'm done with that. But now they have to find another quarterback. Do you have one more thing to say?
Yes, but I think this is where Coop and I both agree. I don't ever believe a head coach should ever have that conversation with said player. I think this should be discussed between representation and general manager. Coach will inform you when your time is needed. You aren't needed right now to jump in the middle of it because now you're going to make an
But he was needed at practice, and that's, I think, that was the last straw for Heupel.
Correct. But I've been a part of situations where the best player was not at practice, but we didn't remove that player from the team. We're in talks with representation of getting that player back. Because last time I checked, you don't play actual football games that count during the spring. So, Coach, we're going to fix this before we get to the regular season. Because right now, we're all making emotional decisions that's making the effect of our team in the bottom line crush all of us. And none of us are winning in this situation. GM, talk to representation. Head coach, stay out of it. GM, inform the head coach. What's the next step? I think it could have been smoothed out by that time.
Yeah, Mike Jones on YouTube. Yeah, Mike Jones. The fact that Heupel doesn't know the market value for good quarterbacks is unbelievable. So not everybody is taking the side of Heupel did the right thing here.
Agreed, Mike Jones. Who?
A lot of times, yes. But now Josh Heupel does have to find another quarterback. He said that we do have to find another guy just from a pure numbers standpoint, which we've always talked about going into the season. How many scholarship quarterbacks you like? 2, not enough. Not enough options, though, in the portal right now. So what kind of quarterback should they be targeting for 2025?
I think you have to get a vet quarterback that can just be a point guard. Coop and I discussed off air that this offense is simple enough to go in there and make a half-field read, get it to the right person, and just get it on down the field. We saw them being able to run the football and play very good defense. You don't need to bring in a quarterback with 3 years left, because in the 2026 class, you have the number one quarterback coming in. So this needs to be a strategic plan of attacking the right veteran to come in, get us through this year, and get us to our future quarterback.
To be clear, they need a starting quarterback. You
They
don't
need a
like
start-
the options they have right now.
We don't, but they might, because they've seen him in practice and we have not. All we've seen is high school film. They've seen enough, maybe in spring, to walk away and say, you know what, we don't need that guy. And that's something else that we have to also factor in. They've seen both quarterbacks in practice in situations that Heupel might walk away and say, you know what, we can get to 9 or 10 games with this, because what we had last year of saying how Nico played was very, very average, maybe slightly above average. And what we've seen in practice, we can get to that.
Yeah, so the two quarterbacks that they have on the roster right now, George McIntyre, the freshman, and then Jake Merklinger, a redshirt freshman as well. They need three. You know that. Right. I know that. Josh Heupel knows that. So even if the third guy is not going to be a guy that would be a starter, they need competitive depth and they need experience, because if Merklinger and McIntyre can't play and they're not ready to play, then all of a sudden you're stuck, right? So you need one of those guys. You look at the portal right now in terms of what it offers this spring, their guy is probably not out there. Now, if I'm Josh Heupel in Tennessee, what I'm saying is I'm going all the way back to Hendon Hooker. I'm going all the way back to Joe Milton. And maybe Joe Milton's not the best example, but I'm saying, hey, look at what you can do in this system, right? And Hendon Hooker was one of those guys. It wasn't a highly touted type of recruitment when they took him from Virginia Tech, but a high-floor player that came in, and this is all about timing and it's all about spacing in this Josh Heupel offense. Now, who's that guy going to be? The other part of this, if you look at the options, like Ohio State, what happens between Lincoln Kineholz and Julian Saint? You look at other schools like Notre Dame, you look at Stephen Jelly, C.J. Carr, Kenny Minchie. Okay, here's the issue. None of those guys have experience either, right? They're all guys that were formerly highly recruited players, talented players in their own right. But the other thing about this that Chris mentioned when he was on, you got Faison Brandon there in 2026. And I think Faison Brandon is one of those type of kids that is okay coming in, redshirting, understanding that he needs a year of development. So I'm looking for a potential 2-year starter here. But if I'm Tennessee, I got to take it year by year. And Chris also alluded to the fact that there are quarterbacks out there that would like to go to Tennessee. So they're going to, I don't want to say they're going to have their pick of the litter, but of where they are right now in the spring, which is a tough place to operate, they'll be in a pretty good spot, and they'll be at the front of the line depending on who enters the portal for the quarterback position.
Coop, you and I both know they got $2.5 million right now to go out and poach whoever they want. We can say it and try to say this does not happen. They're combing through every roster right now, calling every agent that represent good quarterbacks, and they're going to get the guy that they want. Because who wouldn't want to walk into a place that all you had to do was make half-field reads, be a point guard, get the ball, and just have a high football IQ. You don't have to be the most talented quarterback. You just have to be the quarterback that is ready to process the information quickly. 1-2 read, get it out of your hands.
I'll say this. Here's the other part about this, which is interesting for Josh Heupel. You're kind of given like a get-out-of-jail-free card right now. Like, what I mean by that is you just lost your franchise cornerstone of your program. What are your expectations there? 8 wins? 9 wins? Right? Or can you really compete for a college football playoff given the circumstances that you're in right now? So what I'm saying is maybe pocket the $2.5 million, go out, find a starter. Maybe we can get into hypotheticals all day. But what I'm saying is now it's maybe, all right, can we put the funds to better use plugging holes for our quarterback and a guy like Faison Brandon? Maybe we're building 2 years down the line where now all of a sudden we're kind of given this unique olive branch where it's, all right, we can kind of reset the timeline a little bit.
Coop, you and I both know olive branches don't work when you're talking about big-time football in the SEC. I know a true Tennessee fan. Emily, are you okay with winning 7 games this year and losing your quarterback just because you couldn't get it right?
We had this conversation. I said he's winning the PR battle in April, but come fall, it's going to be a challenge to convince people that it's okay to lose.
The third week in October, if Kalen DeBoer rolls him up and spanks him, it's not going to look good because you just lost a quarterback that all you guys had to do was decide between $1.5 million to get this done.
Yeah.
Handle it the right way.
What I'm saying is there's a difference between 4-8 and 8-5. And do you believe that this team is a ceiling team that can contend for the college football playoff? There's different degrees of this. No, you don't want to get your butt kicked every weekend. I expect them to be competitive. But there is a responsible way to go about it and still be effective because you said it. The scheme is what makes this go. You need a guy to operate it, which I think they can find that in good value at the same time.
Yeah, something that helped Nico last year. He had 19 touchdowns himself. Dylan Sampson, the running back, had 22. But whoever comes in next year doesn't have a Dylan Sampson that's there waiting for him. You mentioned this quarterback-friendly system. I do want to touch on this real quick. For whoever ends up coming in during the spring, though, how challenging is it to come in to a brand-new system, even as quarterback-friendly as it may be, a brand new locker room and win over the team in fall camp?
The crazy thing is normal behavior for college football right now, because every so often everyone's transferring and coming in. You either have the spring or you have the fall to come in and be a productive football player. So yes, it is challenging, but 7-on-7, Zoom, can be in the building however long as you want. There's countless analysts that can work with you. You have countless times to work with your receivers on timing and operations. I think you can get it done. Now, are they going to have a little bit of stumble here and there? Yes. But that's where it comes in, where they have a good offensive line, good enough receivers. Their defense is going to be just fine, and the system's going to be okay for most guys to come in and operate it if you can do it from the headspace.
Not the best situation for any of these guys to come into, which is important why we keep going back to they need a vet and a guy that's been around kind of seeing things and played 2 or 3 years of college football that can acclimate a little bit more quickly.
The spring portal window will open on Wednesday. Obviously, this will be the biggest storyline that we pay attention to going in. You should be locked into the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel because we will be locked into everything that's happening. But as we look ahead, this Boulder aside, as our friend Chris Hummer likes to call it, who are some other teams you could see being active in this window with some holes to fill?
I think Miami, we talk about Carson Beck, talking about quarterbacks that are getting paid a lot of money. I look at Miami and I think, all right, you spend all this money on your defensive backfield. You have a really good offensive line. You have a talented running back core. What are you doing at receiver? Isaiah Horton's gone. Xavier Restrepo's gone. Samuel Brown is gone. Elijah Arroyo is gone. And I get it. Miami fans are going to say, well, we got Malachi Toney. We got JoJo Trader. We got Elijah Lofton. I understand that. But you need more players, especially at the receiver position. I think this is more of a numbers game. Try to get some talent, and this is a market that, quite honestly, was oversaturated in December. You're going to have some opportunities here in the spring. I think LSU probably could be potentially in the market for an offensive tackle. I'm sure they'd love a veteran guy there. They got 2 guys that I know they really like a lot, Tyree Adams, Weston Davis, that I think are going to be really, really good players. I'd be interested if a solid name jumped in the market. Would they be a team that would be aggressive there? And then the last one, Michigan. What are you doing with Bryce Underwood, right? I get it. You're paying him a lot of money. Justice Haynes, good offensive line, run the ball, complimentary football. Colston Loveland's gone, and then you think about receiver as well. They don't have anybody returning that had more than 140 yards receiving last year. So
and when you get a young player like Bryce Underwood, Coop, I don't care how dynamic that he truly is, and we both believe that he's a very good quarterback. In a few years might be the best one in college football. You need to get him some friendly pieces around him that he can just get the ball out of his hands and create some dynamic plays. We've seen Michigan win one way, and we know that they can give 2 rats about getting receivers, but we haven't seen the caliber of player at the quarterback position at Michigan. And when you're playing in the Big Ten right now, you're going to have to put a lot of points up. Oregon's in town. Ohio State is saying, even though you guys busted us up, we need receiver play around a prominent quarterback, just like Bryce Underwood is, to give him some pieces to operate in the proper way.
North Carolina would expect them to be aggressive, obviously, outside the Nico Iamaleava thing. They need a lot. And then Colorado is already a team that's done some good things. Sincere Brown, Xavier Hill. I know it's been quiet. Those names aren't going to light up headlines. But I want to give Colorado, Deion Sanders, a lot of credit because they do things right now, at least from a substance standpoint of roster building. These are going to be guys that help them win football games in the fall.
You looked like you were going to say something.
Props to Colorado for being quiet and doing it the right way. Kind of takes a little bit of attention off of them, but that Sincere Brown, when we evaluate him, we looked at him, 6'5", 190. Plays like he's really 6 foot, 200 pounds out of Campbell. just explosive with the ball in his hand, route running ability. We thought that they got rid of a lot of good wide receivers. They're bringing one in that in about the middle of the year, Coop, we might walk away and say this guy's a top half of the draft type of player.
Yeah, almost like there's value doing things in silence every now and then. You know?
I know, it's strange. Usually when we talk about transfer portal, we got to factor in Colorado. That's just been like muscle memory over the last few cycles, but it's been quiet by Colorado standards for sure. We're going to get to your ultimate burning questions, but first I want to give you the results of an ultimate burning poll. I'm just going to go ahead and call it that. If you're watching us on YouTube, you have factored into this poll and hopefully voted for it. We asked you who is to blame for all of this, and currently, oh no, the polls have closed, so this is the final tally here. Nico's agent is at 49%, so congratulations for that victory. Nico Iamaleava himself, 30%. Other, where the leading comment was the NCAA, is at 12%, and then Tennessee at just a measly 7%. So thank you so much for voting in that and making your voices heard. But it's that time of the show. Let's get to your ultimate burning questions. First one up comes from X at 10IC. Love it. How do you think Faison Brandon is looking at this mess at Tennessee? His name has come up a couple times in this conversation, but from his vantage point, what do you think he's thinking about?
I think he's looking at it with big googly eyes and say, well, they got this one wrong. That means they're going to get me right. And, you know, you look at Faison Brandon from his recruiting standpoint, already won a big court case, I believe, in North Carolina. So, you know, from an NIL standpoint. So I think Faison Brandon's going to be in good shape ultimately because I think Tennessee is going to learn their lesson from what just happened. And this is going to be a situation where if this is a young man that I believe that they're convicted on, not only as a player but as a person, they're going to want to make sure that they're really buttoned up here and that they get this right. And I think consistent communication is probably the lesson learned in who you're talking to and making sure you're on the same page. Transparency as well. We know things can change, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think Faison Brandon's probably one of the guys that gains the most out of this situation.
Cooper, I think you had your hands all over that daggone poll. I saw you. You brought your phone out several times.
Smoke's still stuck on the poll.
Oh, yeah, he got his hands all over that poll. But for Faison Brandon, I think this is a great opportunity for him. Like you said, it's all played out. And there's going to be a time when it comes to him renegotiating at some point, and he's going to know, afford who he can afford to be. If you're not that guy that has everything to do with the bottom line of winning, I don't believe you want to go in Josh Heupel's office barking because he's going to send you right out the door.
So they shouldn't worry him or anything.
I wouldn't be worried. You know what the deal is.
Yeah.
Win games, you do whatever you want. You have nothing to do with the bottom line of winning, get out the office and learn how to talk and be what? Coop. Quiet.
Yeah, I know Tennessee fans right now on message boards are really hoping there's somehow, some way he can reclassify and come save the day come fall, but I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen. So we'll see what happens with the Tennessee quarterback situation here. On X, at USC_Sasquatch wants to know, how does this situation affect Nico's draft stock? Yeah, this was supposed to be potentially his final year. You've been all over draft coverage leading into this year, but looking ahead, how could this affect it?
Big question mark. You know, if the play is good enough, it's just going to make everybody forget. Yeah. I mean, it's exactly what Smoke said. If he goes out there, wherever his next spot is, whether it's North Carolina or UCLA, and he elevates that program because of his play, then I think a lot of teams will be able to overlook it, because the other thing that Smoke said and he alluded to, really not a lot of issues with the individual. It's more how this one situation has played out, and it's an unfortunate situation. But if he can find a way to elevate the next program that he's at and live up to his potential, I think NFL evaluators will quickly move on from this and say, hey, that's something that he can learn from, something that he's grown from, not going to be an issue going forward.
With talent comes tolerance. And parents aren't allowed in the daggone locker room. And you're not supposed to negotiate your contracts anyway. I mean, Lamar Jackson's the only parent that negotiated their contract. That didn't end up real good. But I don't think that's going to affect his draft stock. Because, again, I don't think there's anything damaging, character-wise, football character-wise, that we've all heard coming out of any camp with him. It's just the fact of he needs to get to somewhere where he needs to play for a couple of years and get more developed, because he looks like the same guy 2 years ago. That's the bottom line. He's not playing well enough to negotiate anything, and he didn't realize that. Lack of self-awareness on all parts.
So do you not expect him to declare for the draft after this fall, as was probably initially intended?
unless he gets somewhere where he's throwing for 4,000 yards, leads his team far into the playoffs, and can become the leader that we think that he can be and remove some type of the outside noise away from him, yeah, you can jump in and do whatever you want.
And I mean this with all seriousness. I think that's a legitimate question. What if he goes somewhere else? He has a similar season to what he had this past year, and then he decides to go. That's another decision that I'm sure he would like to have back. That's why it's important. Like I bring that up. Like having people that have a common sense and a pulse on what is best for you and your nature and your long term. Because I don't think anybody's thinking long term around Nico right now. It seems all short term in terms, hey, what can we get right now? Not what are we trying to do to put him in the best situation possible on the field to continue his development. So I hope he's in school for another 2 years. What we saw on tape indicates that he needs 2 more years of film. If he makes a massive jump that we don't expect, then, yeah, there are going to be a lot of NFL teams similar to what we saw at the end of the last year with Drew Aller.
Correct.
That are going to be knocking on the door and saying, oh, well, maybe he's ready.
And the sad thing about this, the only name that keeps on getting brought up, Nico. He's the only one that's going to be truly affected wherever he goes next.
Yeah.
By the student union, by every draft analysis, by every fan, everything that he does right or wrong, they're going to magnify it and put it all behind money. And truly, we don't know if that's the main reason why any of this is happening.
Yep. Before we go, Sean wants us to talk about one other quarterback before we say goodbye. Sean Nelson on YouTube wants to know, do you think Dylan Raiola could be better this year, be a playoff contender, and win a Big Ten championship? That's a loaded question. I'll go to you first.
Yeah, that's a lot. Playoff contender out of the Big Ten, I think that would be a stretch. Can he be better? Absolutely. I think this is a team that, how many games did Nebraska win last year? 7. So, yeah, absolutely. I think this is a team that can improve. Dylan Raiola, to your point about Nico Iamaleava, high floor player. What is this going to look like? They made some changes. Marcus Satterfield not going to be the guy calling plays. It's going to be Dana Holgerson. How does that impact him? Nebraska's done some things to add him some weapons, Dane Key being one of those guys, certainly. So to your question, I think the answer is somewhere in between. Do I think they're a CFP contender? No. Do I think they're a Big Ten contender? No, but I think they're a team that can up their win total in 1 or 2 games.
I agree with everything you said, Coop, except not throwing his name in the Tennessee pot. Why wouldn't he think about going to Tennessee?
Oh, boy.
Just saying. Stir it up a little bit.
Why would he?
To Smoke's point, there was some smoke back in December about him being a name that could potentially jump in the portal. And listen, you go back to high school, Chris Peterson used to say this all the time, recruits tell you who they are. You just have to listen. Dylan Raiola had 3 or 4 different programs in high school as well. So it's not this far-off notion. Do I believe that he's there at this point right now? Absolutely not. Is it the craziest thing in the world? Probably not either, right? But you never know. Is there any substance behind what I'm saying? No, not really. It's just,
Neither of you are reporting on
I'm
this.
trying to bring some context to this situation.
But you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, there's always a chance.
I mean, in this sport, we have learned to expect the unexpected. The reason that I responded with, oh boy, is because we have a lot to talk about this week when the spring transfer portal opens. But don't you worry. We're going to be all over it with a transfer portal palooza. Anytime you see a palooza, you know that this is going to be a good time. So join us on Wednesday at 3 Eastern. We'll bring you the latest breaking news. This is presented by the Ultimate College Football Show, which you are watching right now. We appreciate it. We'll tell you who your team is targeting, maybe which players jump in on the day. We'll have some fun breaking news for you. So thank you again so much for watching us here on the Ultimate College Football Show. We'll see you back here Wednesday.